Welcome to the May statewide call of the California Alliance for Community Energy. I am Brett Garrett, a member of the steering committee. I'll introduce our guest in just a moment, our speaker, after reading our vision statement. The California Alliance for Community Energy envisions a community-based and democratized energy system which promotes affordable, resilient, local, renewable energy resources, prioritizing low-income communities that have historically suffered inequitable access to essentials such as affordable energy and a healthy community. Today, we welcome Dr. Therese Peffer from UC Berkeley, who will tell us about the Oakland EcoBlock, a block-scale energy retrofit. Therese's background includes a PhD in architecture with an emphasis on building science. She's a project manager and researcher at CIEE, the California Institute for Energy and Environment, which is part of CITRIS, that is UC Berkeley's Center for Information Technology Research in the Interest of Society. Therese manages and conducts research in smart building technologies, building to grid, demand response, and smart grid research projects promoting comfortable and energy efficient living spaces, such as the Oakland EcoBlock project that we are learning about today. Welcome, Therese. Take it away.
Thank you. Now let's see if I can manage to share my screen well here. All right. Okay, I'm assuming you can see my slides.
Yes.
Okay, great. Okay,
and we also see your annotation, the closed captions.
Okay, hope that's not too distracting. That wasn't intentional, but here we go. Well, I'm delighted to be here today. Thank you so much for the invitation. I have been the project manager and PI of this project for the last couple of years, and I love to talk about it. I think it's an interesting project. I would especially love your feedback and questions, so I look forward to those. So I think I think we're all on the same page. The urgency of climate change drives a lot of our work, a lot of my work specifically. And energy upgrades, one house at a time, is too slow. Most homes in California, as you know, were built before the energy codes and more often owned by low middle income homes. So you have old homes where people can't afford to upgrade them. So I know I'm speaking to the choir here. Housing in California is predominantly single family and 2 to 4 unit. But at least when we were trying to look for precedents for our project, we saw a lot of emphasis on new suburban construction or energy upgrades on existing multifamily. And so here we felt like, well, this is kind of a sweet spot, really, in a place where we need to focus is existing urban single family homes or low multifamily, low density multifamily. So the goal was to provide affordable access to solar and energy upgrades, reduce greenhouse gases, improve the electric grid reliability, and to scale, to figure out how we could get more of these happening. Unique features, of course, we're looking at retrofits of older 1 to 4 unit housing stock, shared rooftop solar, a potential for EV car share and shared curbside EV charger. That's still not finalized, but I'll talk about that. We designed a microgrid, and I'll talk about our process for that. But we chose not to build it, and I can get into the details of that. We were able to do some stormwater mitigation on the block, and we helped the block create a nonprofit association to share the rooftop solar. The initial project was funded, well, the project was funded by the California Energy Commission. We were one of 12 projects as part of the phase 1 feasibility study, where this was what's your dream? What's the technical feasibility, social, economic, financial feasibility of doing some sort of advanced energy community? And we were one of 4 projects that was selected to actually implement our vision back in late 2019. And you can see on the right there, this is how we've divided the project into these, we call them 8 categories, but community, business, finance, policy, and then we have energy, buildings, water, and mobility in terms of our design strategies. So here is a look at the block itself. It is what we did is that one of the first things we did is that we released an opportunity notice, and we asked blocks to self-nominate. And this was great because they already had kind of skin in the game. They came into the project at least somewhat organized. They had a leader, and then they were able to recruit folks from the block. This was our winning block. As you hear, a schematic of the block that was selected through many conversations with the block leadership, with the other top blocks, and with the City of Oakland and PG&E to select this block. It's a cul-de-sac. So it led to some interesting things about the creek at the end there and what we could do with the stormwater on the creek. And you can see the houses in blue are the ones that are participating. Not everyone participated. So we had of the 24, 25 properties on the block, 15 properties were involved. And so that's 25 units. So here we get into some of the details. So this is specifically what we were looking at doing in terms of energy efficiency, insulation and air sealing, electrification of space conditioning and water heating. We are right now in the process of trying to get funding to finish out the electrification for both the cooking, induction stoves, and clothes dryers. Shared rooftop solar, stormwater biodetention, and sidewalk planting up and down the street. And then the innovative legal and governance structures to make this all happen. And the idea again was to provide templates. Like we went through a lot of documents and design. We want to share those, and so that it's easier for the next EcoBlock. We did design the microgrid. I'll talk about that a little bit more in a bit. And then the curbside EV charger and EV car share is there's potential for it, but we're still under a lot of conversations about that. So the intention here is to look at, well, we could continue to go one house at a time, one building at a time for electrification and energy upgrades. Or you could, you can look at an EcoBlock approach where you're doing a bunch at a time, right? And so, and the intention here is to analyze the economies of scale. What economies of scale can we leverage here? And clearly you can reduce capacity for solar and storage by sharing. Some people are gone for months, some people are up at night. So, so if you look at the load itself, there's potential for reducing the capacity of these systems by sharing. Reduce energy transmission losses when you're producing it right there. Save construction time. I have the next slide talks a little bit more about that. When you can share a car and share an EV charger, then you have fewer vehicles, equipment. Decommission natural guidelines. Maybe you've heard of SB 1221, but we've been, a lot of cities have reached out to us saying, wow, how did you get so many people to buy in? And it wasn't 100%, but they're very interested in how you decommission natural gas lines, because anytime there's an earthquake in California, there's always that danger of these natural gas lines exploding, rupturing, causing fires and other safety and health issues. And then finally, this idea of rapidly increasing adopters through the neighbor peer effect. And I'll talk more about that in a minute. So in terms of economies of scale and construction, one thing that we've seen is reducing the soft costs of customer acquisition, right? We saw this actually in the project where we had to replace about half of the roofs in order to install solar. And it was much easier to get a lower bid when there were multiple projects involved. And so we actually saw that achieved on this project. But you can imagine it might be similar for a solar contractor, or home performance contractor, electrification contractor, to be able to aggregate the customers and be able to reduce that soft cost. Fewer truck rolls, delivering appliances or trips to the dump. Potential for bulk purchases of appliance and heat pumps, and we saw that. A new idea that I had never heard of is alleviate the half-day labor issue. So when a project finishes midday and maybe the next project is 30 miles away, you might send your guys home, right? And in this case, and it happened on this block, they finished on one house and marched down the street 100 feet and were able to bring their equipment over and set up to start the next day. The neighbor or peer effect is one of my favorite parts of this project. You may have heard that solar adoption is contagious, or it grows in clusters. Sun City did a study on this a number of years ago where they looked at, say, one house gets solar and then they go back 2-3 years and they see a cluster of homes around the original one that grows over time. And you can imagine why that is, right? These new technologies, heat pumps, solar, induction stoves, they're hard to understand. Now, whereas solar is very visible, and so it's easier for the neighbor to see it and point up at your roof, we still think that this is an important source um, of information, right? A trusted source of information for neighbors to talk to each other about these new technologies and reduce the burden of adopting these things. You can ask things like, how much did that cost? Did you like your contractor? What's the maintenance like? Things like that. So, and it really starts with the community. We lucked out. We this was the community that reached out to us. And we, there were 12 applicants, and this was the winner. They were already somewhat established as a community. They were having block parties, and you can see the diversity. There's it's a quite diverse block, both in age. We have retirees. I think there's been 4 or 5 babies born on the block since we've been involved, and about 5 or 6 languages spoken on the block. And so we were providing, interpretation and translation into Chinese and Spanish. But just a really wonderful, vibrant community. And we wanted to really reach them where their concerns were. They want more comfortable homes, improved air quality, keep the lights on, lower the energy bills, local clean neighborhood transportation. So cleaning up the outside air, not just the inside air. And then, really helping to strengthen the ties within the community, working together. So one of the things we asked them to do was join and engage in a homeowners association for 5 years to co-own the solar. One of the things we're doing is we're testing the calculation of the solar credit with the fees to cover the operation, maintenance, insurance for this association and for the block. And then to also take care of the biodetention swale and the streetwide planting. And there's an image last November of us planting at the end of the block. I think we had about 10 different meetings on the block where we would go out and talk about different aspects of the project. You can see that we were in the midst of COVID here, and so we were all wearing masks. And we spent a bit of time creating it used to be a monthly newsletter, then it switched to quarterly, and now it's like twice a year or something. But the idea was to really engage with people, to kind of explain some of these concepts, some of these technologies, to let them get to know us a little bit better. One of a saying that I read or heard recently at a conference was that progress moves at the pace of trust. And I think there's a lot of truth to that. It took us a lot of time to build that trust with the community. So switching now to the microgrid, the idea here was to work with the utility to create a grid that can operate on its own if the power is out, to have both a battery and the distribution lines. In our case, we have rooftop solar, and we worked with the utility to use their overhead lines. So here's another image of that where it shows, so if power goes out in Oakland, the switchgear would open, and this would be an islandable microgrid with solar, with a central battery and grid forming inverter, and not all houses need to participate. So that technically their meter would or their switch would open, and they would not benefit by the power. But here are some of the details of what we designed in terms of the size of the battery and 100 kilowatts of solar on the 15 roofs and so forth. We went through, we had meetings with PG&E, let's see, for about 18 months every 2 weeks. And so we spent a lot of time on the design of it with them. We went through the application process, the wholesale distribution tariff. We worked them to become eligible under the CMET tariff, the Community Microgrid Energy, I think it is, tariff. And it was, and we went through the design process and figured out all the, so we figured that it was technically feasible, but because of COVID, because of inflation, because of supply chain issues, it became less and less financially feasible to build this microgrid. And arguably, it was great that we went through it. If we had another 2 million or so, maybe we would have built it just as a research platform, just to kind of kick it through its paces. But this part of Oakland doesn't have too many outages, and so it probably would be better to focus on critical facilities or more rural applications. The next is just looking at design construction. Obviously, we want to reduce the loads through air sealing and insulation to make the equipment smaller and cheaper. So that's one of the things we did. So this is our focus is air, attic and floor insulation and air sealing. We did not insulate walls just because of the cost. Space conditioning, water heat pump, electrification, and jury's still out on the clothes drying and cooking, but we are very hopeful that that will happen, and we should know in the next few weeks. Kitchen and bathroom fans. A lot of these homes did not have functioning fans, so that's something we really needed to look at. We did upgrade the electric service panel for all of them, and if we were to do this again, we may not. That would be something we would look at again. And then rooftop solar, and like I said, about half of them required replacing the roof. We held, with respect to water efficiency, one of the funnest things we did was we worked with Rainforest Action to put on this laundry to landscape irrigation workshop. So there was about 8 people from the block, different neighbors that came and descended upon this backyard for about 4 hours on a Saturday. And dug trenches throughout the backyard. You can see that one of them there on the right to go around the trees. And we had a group inside, a couple people inside that were working on the plumbing so that you could take your wastewater from your laundry and flip a lever, and then the water would go to your backyard and water your trees. It was a really fun way to build community too. And then the end of the block, we got a small EPA grant to build a little biodetention swale. And the idea was to slow down the water and clean the water before it went into the creek. So you can see on the left there, this is where we were talking to the community. You can see that chalk line on the ground there that corresponded with the actual construction or actual outline of the swale itself. This is what it looked like before. If you stood up against that orange fence and looked down, you would see the creek about 10, 12 feet down. So a really steep decline, and the stormwater was causing quite a bit of erosion there. And then here it is completed. I think this was from last October. The next thing we were looking at doing is to replace, you can see there's a fair amount of concrete in these sidewalk planting strips. And they're quite wide. The sidewalk is a nice 5 feet wide, and the planting strip is about the same, about 5 feet. And so the image on the right there in red are all the places that we removed concrete up and down the street. And so, yeah, so there's an image there of us taking out that concrete. And then beyond the planting of the bioswale, we also planted 6 trees on the block and planted the 6 trees in January, early January. And then in end of March, we brought in 9 cubic yards of mulch and spread that around the block as well. So that's the image you see on the right. We were very interested in adding a car share for the block. In fact, when we first interviewed people on the block or surveyed people on the block, a majority, like 60-some%, said that they would get rid of a second car if they had access to car share right there on the block. But what we found is that it was really difficult to find a car share company that would work with a private group. The intention was to have a car share that was only be available to this block, right? And that's more difficult to do. We went through a couple of companies. The curbside EV charger that we were working with, we ended up working with, is It's Electric. And you can see the image of it there on the right. They work with the homeowner or the property owner to put a submeter from the house for the charger. The cord stays with the car, and it's a really nice, very streamlined EV charger. It's very, it feels like it fits in with a residential neighborhood very well. The city of Oakland requires a major encroachment permit. Places like Berkeley only require a minor permit, which would have been nice. And the city would not let us paint, they would not enforce a EV vehicle only for this spot. And so that's why this is a little bit up in the air. There's interest from the community, but there's a lot of concerns about how this would actually work. What if you couldn't park the curbside charger somewhere? We did have a couple of neighbors stand up and say, they could park in our driveway if they really needed to. So this is still under investigation. With respect to policy and law, there were a lot of things that we looked at, not just the city codes and permits, utility tariffs and regulations. We had 3 different kinds of lawyers. We had a real estate lawyer that was dealing with the tenant property owner issues, land use issues. We have our wonderful cooperative lawyer, Therese of Tuttle Law, who helped us form the homeowners association. We also had an energy regulatory lawyer and general counsel as well for the project. So we looked at different types of governance vehicles for this and decided that an HOA light, we took the best parts of an HOA and tried to ignore everything else. So tried to make this as simple as possible for the neighbors. And they really recruited each other to form this membership. To me, that was a really very compelling and very nice to see. I created a 65-page PowerPoint slide that had all the documents and how to access them and what they meant and all this. And they said, no, we're just going to talk to our neighbors, which was very smart and was the right move. I would say at least 2 of the neighbors, English as a second language, would not have participated. I mean, here I'm the sorry, but white woman from the university coming and offering some free stuff. And like I said, trust was a big part of this project. The fact that their neighbors stepped up and said, I really think you should do this. I think it would be beneficial, was really very powerful. So yeah, so 5 neighbors initially stepped up to take leadership. We met with them over the course of about a year in developing the bylaws, the membership agreement. Therese taught us this really cool consensus decision-making process that we since used a couple of times, where she would pose a question and have a couple of options, and each person had an opportunity to remark on which option they preferred and any objection to other options. And through that process, we were able to come to consensus pretty quickly. We sent out a survey we had 5 different designs for the stormwater biodetention swale. And we also did this for the location of the electric vehicle charger. So it was really, really a great process to use. We set up a 5-year depreciation schedule for the solar. So if they wanted to get out for whatever reason, get out of the association, they could. And we try to set up a very equitable fee structure. That's what we'll be testing in the next year. We really tried to make the legal writing easy to understand as well. With respect to the business and finance, so in this case, you can see the private assets are that top row, and then the shared assets or block scale are that second row. In our case, the capital costs are financed by or provided by the grant. So that's why that's grayed out there, because we wanted to see, well, what is this going to look like for the next one? And so we looked at things like on-bill financing, on-tariff financing. I know Hummel is really heavily involved with this. And so we think that this is a potential strategy for moving forward for electrification and home performance affordability. Still looking at other sources, but that's the one that looked the most viable. And then for the shared assets, we looked at communities facility district, California Melrose, the idea that as a community, you can get together and have a small park developed or a pool in your community, and then have that be triggered on your property taxes for the next 25, 30 years. So it's not it's not a perfect fit, but we did find that it was fairly viable. The other option is that a third party finances and owns the major upgrades in the energy generation and storage and controls and things like that. So less bottom up and a little bit more top down, but we still think it is a viable approach. And we did want to look at the possibility of both. Next steps, we have not, believe it or not, we have not finished construction. We were delayed by a couple of different things. One is an upgrade to the block, and 2 is just it was part of the application process. We chose to do batch applications, and PG&E, it's not easy for them to handle batch like that. And so it took a while to kind of transfer that from the person who submitted the applications and then the contractor who's actually doing the work. We are looking for funding to complete the electrification and to make our website much more interactive. We'll be looking at testing revenue streams. We've already talked to one load aggregator that was said, hey, if you've got 1 kilowatt of a load, we can, you can generate some revenue from that. And here we have probably 30 kilowatts of things like water heaters. If it's a tank water heater, um, we think we can control it in a way where we can provide some services to the grid, but still accommodate people's choices in terms of how they use their water. So we'll be kind of kicking the tires for the next year and just making sure that everything is installed and working well, interviewing the residents, ask how this process went, other than it's been really, really long, Therese, which I know I'll hear a lot of. And then the idea is to document our lessons learned. We're working on that right now on our website. So that'll be rolling out over the next 6 months or so. And continuing to brainstorm how to scale and how to transfer this knowledge effectively. We've conducted quite a bit of outreach, at places like ACEEE Summer Study for Energy Efficiency in Buildings, American Institute of Architects, Green Build, and other places. We've given a couple of tours. We had Laura Clivens of KQED did this wonderful podcast where she interviewed folks on the block that was released about a year and a half ago, rebroadcast back in a year ago in February. And there will be another 8-minute segment on All Things Considered in June. So we're really excited about that. And our website's still getting a lot of interest from folks. A lot of lessons learned, worked with PG&E to design the microgrid. It's technically possible. So we can talk about that more if people are interested. The battery shed, when you deal with a battery, like a commercial battery in a very tight urban environment, it had to have noise mitigation. It had to have an air conditioning system for the battery. And so it ended up being pretty expensive, which is unfortunate. The EV car share was desired, but it's difficult. I hope we can make this work, but right now it's uncertain. The stormwater swale, really fun for community building. A lot of people came out to plant. I think we had 18 people from the community out to plant the bioswale. So that was really fun. We hired experienced contractors. We did not hire, this was not a learn by doing program. We thought about that, but for this project, we really wanted people to work with us as researchers and work as designers to really think outside the box in some cases. And I think that has paid off. It wasn't the least expensive option, but we feel it was the right one for us. Still thinking about the upgrading the electric panels. Like I mentioned, the contractor thinks we probably shouldn't have upgraded all of them. Home energy management, I've been looking at trying to find a good home energy management system for about 5 years, if not more. And I just haven't found anything I love. The idea here is that to be able to control your appliances in the house to reduce the load, especially during that high price part of the day. So on time of use rates, 4 to 9. And so that you can do things like you not have your dryer and your hot water heater and your electric vehicle, everything charging at the expensive times. But, we were finding a lot of solutions that had cloud control, right? Which didn't make a lot of sense to me in terms of if the power goes out, but say if you have a battery, then you can't run your stuff or you can't manage your stuff. That doesn't make sense to me. And what do you do if home energy management systems, a lot of them rely on Wi-Fi. And what do you do if a tenant moves out with their Wi-Fi? You want something permanent. And so a few things that we need to still figure out. We developed a very detailed model of operation maintenance and insurance costs. I showed you the different ownership models and still trying to figure out how to finance this. On the regulatory side, we were really thrilled when the IRA came out and nonprofit associations can get a tax credit, not just for the solar and for the battery, but for microgrid controls. So we were really excited about that. I mean, 30% is a big chunk of this. It's a bummer that we weren't able to build the microgrid, but at least we thought that was progress. We'll see what happens. The community tariffs were just not ready yet. And I think the issue there, I believe they're being worked on, the community microgrid enablement tariff. But my understanding is like right now, resilience is not valued, right? And so it's hard to, this was our issue with building the microgrid, is that it's hard to build a microgrid for resilience when no one values that resilience. If it's a community that doesn't have a lot of power outages, or the utility itself doesn't put some sort of value on, oh, fantastic, a microgrid, that'll help us out in the following ways. So it's unfortunate that it just seems like it's a bit ahead of its time. Maybe that will be sorted out. Yeah, the process of sharing energy with multiple meters. So we're working with a company called IV Energy, and they will help us reallocate the solar credits to each home equitably. And they work with a lot of multifamily solar, right? So similar to that master meter. In our case, we didn't have master meter. Everyone has their own meters. And so we have to do this kind of in a separate process. Through creating the association, we developed a lot of, I think, really cool templates, membership agreements, bylaws, and stuff like that that can be used over by someone else. On the social side, it was really important to us that the community volunteer and lead. I think in retrospect, if we were to do this again, we should provide more opportunities for the community to lead and pay them for that, right? We hired a community liaison before we wrote the proposal, and that was really critical to having a separate entity beyond the university to help work with the community, to really foster that two-way discussion, to provide education. And like I said, translation and interpretation was really critical to making sure that those hard to reach folks, the people that might not be interested in adopting these, could feel included in the process. And I mentioned the consensus method. The barn raising, community building projects like Laundry Landscape are really, really important and vital. And especially having the neighbors, giving them opportunities to talk to each other was really, really important. So what we ended up with is not this sense of EcoBlock is you have to have a microgrid, or you have to, do full electrification or anything like that. The idea is that it's really a portfolio of strategies. So if your goals are involve a community in some sort of sustainability, decarbonization, and to involve a workable finance and policy, then you can do whatever you want. One of the neighbors on the block started, um, maybe you've heard of Ridwell plastic recycling. For his home, he didn't have enough, but when he shared it with neighbors, and they have a shared plastic recycling on the block, which is great. There was a woman on the block who was already sharing plant starts. Okay, that's a great way to start building that community. And then you can get into other aspects like street planting or community bioswales. Getting neighbors talking tech to each other, right? Start there, and then you can go into perhaps co-ownership of systems, whether it's an electric vehicle charger or solar, and then bulk purchases. Get 5 people together to go after induction stoves or something like that. Maybe you've heard of United Solar Neighbors, I think it's called, where I think they try to facilitate the conversations to help, so you can go to a solar provider and try to get a discount on your purchase. And the same thing for decarbonization. What about load management? What if you had aggregated load management that was more than one household? What are the revenue generation opportunities there? And then if you move out beyond your home to the block, EV car share, shared curbside EV charger, and then or solar and storage. And then, the jury's still out on the financing part of this and the policy side, but we think the on-bill financing is promising. A revolving loan fund. We've heard of green bonds. We've heard of green banks. And so really exploring some of these things for the next block, we think is important. And with that, it did take a village. We had incredible partnership with the City of Oakland, with other advanced energy community projects, with the state of California, with PG&E, the utilities, and that incredible band of folks you see on the right there, the researchers, and then the contractors, architects, urban planners, lawyers, consultants. I had meetings where I would have energy regulatory lawyer with electrical engineer with the contractor talking. None of us know what we don't know, right? And it took conversations like that to really move things forward. So with that, I'm happy to take any questions, and thank you for your attention.
Thank you for watching this presentation from the California Alliance for Community Energy. This concludes the published portion of our monthly call. If you would like to participate in our monthly calls, including Q&A, please consider joining the California Alliance for Community Energy. For more information, you can see our website at cacommunityenergy.org/apply.